Welcome back to the shop. I'm Kirk Anderson. In this week's video, I'll be making a TV stand. I'll be making this project from 3/4 inch Europly walnut plywood that was special ordered from the Home Depot. Now in this special order, I also had the material pre-cut to my specifications, which eliminated me having to do any cutting on the table saw. Now this TV stand is basically going to be two large pieces, a top and a bottom, and joined together by 4 vertical pieces. Now I'll be basically using a mortise and tenon type joint to attach the vertical pieces. And the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to cut the mortises in the top and the bottom using my router. Then it's over to the table saw with a dado blade to cut the tenons. Now the router bit I used to cut the mortises is a 1/2 inch router bit. Now once the tenons were cut on the vertical pieces, I'll need to trim the ends off. And in order to hold the pieces secure while you're doing this, you need a vise of some sort. I don't have a permanent vise on any of my workbenches, but I do have this portable vise that really comes in handy. Now to trim off the ends, I'm using a Japanese pull saw to do this. I cut down just prior to the shoulder of the tenon. Then I just flip the board and then cut down as close to the shoulder as I can. Of course, when you're making this cut, you want to make sure that you do not cut into the shoulder. And so that leaves a little bit of the wood protruding, and so we need to clean that up using a chisel. And since I used a router bit to cut the mortise, I need to round over the ends of the tenons. Now I'm going to leave all the exposed edges of the plywood exposed, but I'm going to round them over with a bullnose bit on the router table. Now once all the edges were rounded over with the bullnose bit, now it's time to do some serious sanding on them. I started out with 100 grit, then I went to 150 grit, and I ended up with 220. Now the surface on the plywood was pretty smooth, but I still needed to sand it down. So using the random orbital sander, I started with 150 and then went to 220. Now it's time for assembly, and it's just going to be assembled with glues and clamps. Now when I did cut the tenons, I cut them about a 1/16 of an inch short from bottoming out on the mortise. That will leave room for any glue to stay in there instead of squeezing out. Now you want to make sure you put plenty of glue in there though, and definitely make sure that you're gluing the sides of the mortise. And I'll also put a little bit of glue on the tenon. And I also cut the tenons a little short, that's so I had a little bit of wiggle room in placing the vertical pieces. And once all the pieces are in, just a matter of clamping them up and then letting the glue set. And now it's time to put a nice finish on this piece. I'm just using a mixture of polyurethane and mineral spirits for a wipe-on poly. And then just look at how that grain pops once the finish is applied. Now once the first coat dried, I lightly sanded it down with 400 grit sandpaper and then applied a second coat. Now the second coat is a little bit lighter than the first. And then I'll do this another 2 times for a total of 4 coats of the wipe-on poly. Now once the finish was dry, it's just a matter of attaching the legs. And these legs I just got on Amazon, and there will be a link below on these. Now the legs did come with screws, but they were 1-inch screws, so if I had just used them, it would have gone straight through the plywood. So actually what I did, I ground down the ends of some of the screws so they wouldn't go through. Then I also made sure that the 2 screws on the end were over the vertical piece, and that way I would use the full screw and I'd actually screw into the vertical piece. And there she is, ready for some serious binge watching. Now this is just part 1 of this build. In the second part, I'll actually be building a drawer that will go in the center of the stand. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And as always, all you woodworkers out there, just get out there and cut some wood.